Good night, everybody. It's truly an honor to be here today. Welcome to Leadership Conversations with myself, Colin. I am the CEO and founder of KeenVision Leadership, and it's truly an honor and a privilege to be with you tonight. I'm excited for today. I'm excited that we are in the beginning of another week. It's another week of productivity, another week of really going forward for really working towards our goals and our purpose and our destinies. And so, welcome tonight. Welcome. Before we get started, I want to ask everyone if you can to please share, tag somebody that you know who's going to be able to benefit from this conversation. The goal of these conversations is to have a discussion and discuss some of the challenges and benefits of being a leader, and understanding that leadership is all about being able to make a difference, being able to be an example, being able to help cast vision. And we all have what it takes to be leaders. We all have what it takes to be great leaders. It's just about being able to really truly see ourselves as such and really taking the necessary steps to get to that point of walking in our leadership role. So thanks to everyone that's tuning in tonight. I'm really excited about this topic. I want to give a shout out to everybody that's on. I want to shout out Brother Darrell. Thanks for tuning in. To my beautiful wife Asha. Thanks for tuning in. Everyone who is on, watching. It's exciting. It's a new day. It's a new time that we're in. We're mid-April, which is surprising that we've made it already this far in 2021. So it's interesting to say the least. But it's truly a privilege, and as we are continuing our discussion, I want to talk about a few things concerning the leadership. I shared last week how I want to discuss a few of the challenges as well as benefits of being a leader, and some of the things that we don't really think about, or we don't really take into consideration or evaluate when it comes to us being leaders, especially as Christian leaders. Good evening, Sister Aquila. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate the support. Yeah, so I'm excited because I want to start this discussion on the cross and the crown of leadership. I'm excited because, like I said, this is something that we don't often talk too much about. Good evening, Sister Susan. God bless you. Want to talk about the cross and the crown of leadership. Now, this, like I shared last week, this series, coming off of our visionary series, I wanted to start a conversation about Christian leadership. I think one of the biggest things that we see in Christianity and in Christian leadership is that there's a shift, there's a change. And it's so funny because in preparing for tonight, I remember the message that I preached in 2019, I think it was, about there being a changing of the guards. And I didn't know then exactly what it meant, but I preached that message and about how things were changing. And you look at 2021, especially with this pandemic, this has really caused a catapulting and an acceleration in the change. There's such a shift, there's such an acceleration when it comes to how things are done, especially in the world of Christian leadership. We're seeing now that the gospel is moving beyond just the four walls of church, and ministry is growing and expanding beyond just the Sunday morning service. Ministry is now expanding into different areas. It's expanding now into business. It's expanding over into the nonprofits. It's expanding into education. It's expanding into all different different arenas and all different channels, and social media is been a big push in developing that. I'm seeing more and more Christian leaders, Christian business owners popping up. Good evening, Sister Shanice. God bless you. I'm seeing more people bringing the gospel into their industry. So whether it's in clothing, I'm seeing a lot of Christian clothing wear that's out. Christian makeup artists, Christian business owners, all kind of different arenas that people are expanding and expressing their faith through. And so I wanted to start this conversation because we're really in a different time. We're really in a different season where it's not just about church on Sunday and church on Wednesdays. It's more than just the Bible studies, and it's more than just the Sunday morning worship, preaching on the pulpit, but God has allowed us the opportunity to expand and develop and really spread the gospel through whatever skill and talent that we have available. So tonight I want to start the discussion, because one of the things that I want us to recognize is that when it comes to leadership, it's almost like a double-edged sword. There's the cross, and then there is the crown. Now we know from the ministry of Jesus how he was the Son of God, and so he came to die on the cross, but he also came to be elevated to the right hand of the Father. And so when it comes to leadership, especially we have to identify with the fact that we have to both carry the crown and the cross. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more. But in developing KeenVision, one of the mandates that I feel is the importance of helping people to really identify. Prophetess Dahima, God bless you. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah. So one of the key things that I've come to notice about the time that we're in is that we have so many people who are talented and gifted, and they're being developed in their areas, and they're being able to showcase those skills and abilities, but they're not being prepared for leadership. You look on social media, right? You see so many talented people, whether they're singers or dancers or makeup artists or designers or counselors or coaches or interior designers. There's so many different fields where you see so much talent and so many people who are gifted. And we hear, all the time different things. We experience the laying on of hands. We see prophetic words being released. We see prophetic impartation and activation taking place, but there's not as much emphasis on developing people in the areas of leadership. So what we have a whole host of talented, gifted people who are pursuing the crown, who are pursuing greatness, but are not prepared for the issues and the problems and the struggles that come with it. Right? There's so many people who are trying to get put on, who are trying to build their brand, who are trying to show the world their talent. But the thing that we need to understand is that the higher you go, the more influential that you become, is the more challenges that come with it, and the more that we need to develop as leaders. I've been in ministry for a majority of my life, and I've always seen teachings on how to use your gifts. I've seen teachings on how to use your talents, right? I can tell you a million different times that I've heard people preach the subject of the servants and the talents. And being used to identify people using their gifts in ministry. But not a lot of emphasis is put on understanding the importance of leadership, developing of character, developing of discipline, development of all the different aspects of leadership that are necessary. So people are forced to grow in their talents, but also forced to grow in a trial by error kind of circumstance. We're not training people to understand and be leaders. We're training them to be effective and to do the work, but not how to lead people. And so what you have now is a generation of people who are gifted and talented and seeking validation based on their gifts and their talents. Now, while that's good, it's bad in the sense that you have so many people who struggle with rejection because people are only following them for what they can do. They're not following them for who they are, and they're not influencing people based on who they are or the vision that they carry, but they're only looking for validation because of what they can do. So what happens is that you have people, when they face challenges, they face struggles, and they face rejection, they're not able to stand, they're not able to continue leading because they don't get that validation. So now we have a host of people who can prophesy, who can preach, and then if you don't prophesy well, or you don't preach as well, or you don't sing as well, people reject you, and then you're not able to continue in what God has called you to do because you're not able to handle that rejection. A lot of people, they go astray. They fall into, they make mistakes. They fall into the trap of not continuing or walking away or turning away from what God has called them to do because people don't like them or people don't like something that they've done or said. And it's something that you see. Good evening, Beverly. Thank you for tuning in. And so we have so many people who are not prepared. And so I feel a mandate, and it's funny because it's a mandate that I've been kind of running from, but being the things that I've seen and have experienced, I feel that now's the time to really truly step into it. I have a mandate to help leaders be prepared, to be prepared for what's to come with the weight of leadership. I understand that people are talented and they're gifted and they're great, but to be able to still manage the weight of the crown, but be able to manage the weight of the cross. Because we can't just, they both are one, they could both go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. You can't have success without failure. You can't have happy days without sad days. You can't experience the joy without experiencing the pain. And so we have to understand that as leaders, we have to carry both the cross and the crown. And so we can't just be narrowly focused on one thing. I've seen so many people who fail in leadership because they're only focused on the crown, and I see those who fail to start because they're only focused on the cross. They only see the suffering and the pain, but they don't actually, so that it prevents them from actually stepping forward and actually moving in what God has called them to do. But in order for us to truly be successful, we have to be prepared to manage and handle both. Now, I've had the unique experience, right? I've had the unique experience of working closely with leaders since I was a child. And I didn't really think of anything of it until maybe about a couple of years ago, that since I first started going to church and started and I was in ministry, even from the age of 8, God has always had me working directly with leadership. So every church that I went to, especially being the musician, being the keyboard player for majority of my life, and majority of the churches that I've worked in, I've had close relationships with leadership at every ministry that I've been to. And so I didn't know until a couple of years ago, I realized until a couple of years ago that during that time, God was preparing me and teaching me and exposing me to certain things that the normal congregation doesn't have access to, or isn't able to see. Because one of the things that we do as leaders is we show the good, we show the happy, we put on the happy face, we put on the strength, and we show that we're strong leaders and that we can handle anything, and we put on our cape and we put on our mask and we play the superhero role. But I've had the unique experience of seeing leaders at their best and seeing leaders at their worst. And so I've had that unique experience of observing and being a fly on the wall and seeing how they've handled it. And I've had the pleasure of being under good leaders, and I've had the pain of being under bad leaders. And through it all, God was teaching me about leadership. And I really feel the need to share what I've learned over the years with other leaders, because we have to be prepared. We have to be prepared to experience everything. We have to be prepared for the disappointment. And too many leaders are not prepared for the disappointment. They're not prepared for the discouragement. They're not prepared for the heartache and the headache. They're only prepared for the good. You see a leader operating, and you're so inspired by what they do that you don't recognize that they too have struggles and they too have hardships. And then now you push yourself to try to get to get into a leadership role, not being prepared and realizing that it's harder than it looks. And so it's important that we understand as leaders, as Christian influencers, that we have to be able to show people and lead people based on who we are and not just what we do. See, the thing about leadership is that people will be attracted to what you do, but a true leader and a good leader is able to get people to follow after their vision and follow their character so following who they are more than what they do. Because see, when people follow you for who you are and for the vision that you have, they will be with you through thick and thin. But when someone follows you just for what you can do, they will follow you until they get what they need, and then they're gone. And so, thinking about the ministry of Jesus, right, the greatest leader, he had a unique ability to attract, or he had the unique mindset to attract the his 12 disciples based on who he was and not just what he was doing. So he had his disciples that followed him for who he was, but the multitude followed him for what he did. And we all know the story of when Jesus feeding the multitude and feeding the 5,000, and them leaving him when he tells them that they have to eat his body and drink of his blood. We all know that stuff. But it's interesting that Jesus had this conversation with the 12 after the fact. He says to them, who do men say I am, and who do you say that I am? And it wasn't just to get them to say, oh, you're the Christ, or you're the Messiah, but it was for them to for him to find out where their minds were at, where their hearts were, and to see if they were following him for what he can do, or if they were following him for who he was. Are you following me because of the miracles? Are you following me because of the food? Or are you following me because my assignment is to be the Son of God? Are you following me because you really believe that my purpose and my vision, that the purpose of why I'm here is the reason why I'm here? Are you following me for the reason why I'm here, or are you following me for what I can do? And so in leadership, you'll experience these things. You'll experience those who will follow you because they believe in you as a person. They believe in your vision. They believe in your ideals. They believe in where you're going. And then you'll have those who will only follow you for what you can do, because you make them feel goosebumps when you speak, because you make them feel motivated when you speak. And so as leaders, we have to one, be prepared for both, two, identify both, so that you know who you can lean on and who you can't. And so there's a whole lot of that comes with being influential. And it's not just about the high praises and people saying how great you are and how awesome you are, but it's about being able to attract people to where you're going, attract people to the vision, not just your gift and your talent. So we as people, we have to be prepared to carry both the cross and the crown. And it's interesting because I believe that there has been so much emphasis on building those gifts and building someone's talent, but what's lacking is the emphasis on discipleship, the emphasis on leadership development. In all the ministries I've been to, I've been to all type of classes about expanding your ministry, and even now you see so many things about how to build your brand, how to build your ministry, how to build your following, how to build your influence, but you rarely see how to build your leadership skills, because leadership is a whole different animal. And I didn't realize this until when I was in college, and I was in college and I was working with a pastor for a church that I was playing at. And we were having a conversation, just talking, and he was talking about a situation that he had to deal with. He had a difficult situation that he had to deal with some members in his church, and I said to him something along the lines about preaching and how that's difficult or whatever, and he said to me, preaching is the easy part. He said, if I could just preach and go home, that would be. It's the things that I have to do outside of preaching that's hard. It's the dealing with the people that's hard. That's the challenge. He said, preaching is easy. Now me, I'm a young preacher. I spent all my years behind the scenes, either behind the camera or behind the keyboard, and so it blew my mind to hear someone say that preaching is easy, is the easy part of ministry. That walking in your gift is the easy part of ministry. But when you really think about it, it's much easier than dealing with people. Because in leadership, you have to deal with people. And you have to be able to deal with different personalities, different characters. You have to be able to deal with other people's emotions and other people's feelings while dealing with your own. But not too much training is being put into helping people to be prepared for that. I'm reminded of a conversation that I overheard, and I've seen this a lot of times on Clubhouse, conversations that they had about generals versus young leaders and that whole dynamic. And one thing that I feel strongly about is that a lot of the generals have a responsibility. And unfortunately, there are some who take on that responsibility and some who don't take on that responsibility. But I believe that generals have a responsibility to teach and train the younger generation, the younger leaders, because they have that wisdom, they have that wealth of knowledge, they have that experience that they can pass down to the next generation. But the unfortunate thing is that they've spent so long building their own brand and their own ministry and using the talents of the younger generation to help build their ministry, that you rarely see the outpouring of knowledge. Yes, they'll lay hands, and yes, they'll minister, and yes, they'll prophesy, and yes, they'll teach and they'll preach, but there needs to be a transfer of knowledge to help to develop the younger leaders. Because as generals, they have seen certain things. They've experienced the what's behind closed doors. They've seen different things that have taken place, and so there needs to be a transfer of that knowledge. Because if there's a transfer of that knowledge combined with the talent and the gifts of the younger generation and the energy of the younger generation, we can raise up a generation of leaders that can be so effective and can be so powerful outside of just the church. If we had that passing of knowledge and that passing of information, we could have a revival in the business world. We can have a revival in the media world. We can have a revival in the sports world. We can have a revival in the music industry. Revival can be greater than just the denominations of churches that are out there. But because there's a lack of passing down of the knowledge, the younger generation seems to be lacking. And so it's so funny that I've been feeling this way and been thinking about this, and come to find out that Bishop T.D. Jakes is now getting ready to release a book that talks exactly about that, being able to pass down information. But I want to emphasize that there are good leaders out there. There are great leaders out there who are effective, who are influential and inspirational and help. But when you have those young leaders who experience the bad part of leadership, and the unfortunate thing, especially when it comes to the kingdom, is that there's a lot of emphasis on bad leadership. There's a lot of examples of bad leadership. And so now it becomes this issue that we've been struggling with. And it becomes a hindrance. So we as leaders, we have to kind of shift, and we have to kind of change the dynamic. That as we're learning, we're passing down to others, and we're adding value to others, and we're inspiring others, and we're sharing with others. And so I wanted to have this conversation, or start this series and talking about these things, because these are some real topics that are not fully discussed. We can teach how to preach, we can teach the word, we can teach all these things, but we need the practical application. We need to know what situations, what circumstances to apply certain understandings and certain teachings. I can preach different revelations on who do men say that I am, right? But when I can be able to apply it to understanding vision and understanding purpose and understanding who do I allow on my team, or who do I work closely with. See, that's the thing. When you're working closely with people, you have to know them that labor among you. You have to know those who are with you because they believe in your purpose, and those who are with you because what you can give them, what they can get from you. When you think about Jesus asking, who do men say that I am, it wasn't just about, like I said, just about him being the Christ, but him understanding his purpose. His purpose was to be the Christ. His purpose was to redeem man from sin. In spite of what it was going to take to get there. He knew that he was going to die. He knew that he was going to experience a gruesome, excruciating, painful death. And so he needed them he needed to know, are you ready to be with me through all of this? And so it's important that we understand that these are the things that come along with leadership and come along with influence. Because leadership is influence, being able to influence others. It's more than just having a title, being praised, being celebrated. It's about really having your hands in the mud, doing the dirty work, really building and teaching and helping others to grow and influencing others to go in the direction of following Christ. And so that's a part of this conversation that I want to have. And I'm going to be covering different topics. And so I don't know how long this particular series is going to go, but I really feel that it's important that we address these things because there's so many things that come along with it. How do you deal with the disappointment? How do you deal with the rejection? How do you deal with the failure and the success? Because there are challenges that come with both. And so how do you deal with those things? How do you deal with being betrayed? How do you deal with being loved? Especially if you're not used to being loved. How do you deal with the things that you now receive once you've been elevated to a greater position that you didn't have before? Because you will experience betrayal, you experience love and appreciation, but not everyone is equipped to handle those things. And that's why it's both the cross and the crown, because there are good parts of leadership that we are prepared and not prepared for, and there are bad things about leadership that we are prepared and not prepared for. There's so many leaders who are not prepared to be celebrated. There are people who are not prepared to be appreciated. Those are the ones who allow it to go to their head, right? Those are the ones who become that tyrant leader, that bully leader who demands praise, who demands to be acknowledged, who demands to be exalted. That's because they're not prepared to handle that. And so how do we deal with these things? So, like I said, I don't know how long this conversation is going to be, how long the series is going to be, but I'm excited. And so I want us to really have a conversation about this. So one of the things that I want is some of your feedback. I want to get some of your ideas, some of your questions. So one thing that I need from everybody is, what are some things or questions that you have about leadership that you would like me to talk about or to address? I want you to send me a DM. I want you to send me a Facebook message, because I want to address some of these questions. And I want to talk about it. I want to talk about, and I want to ideate with each of us. Some of the things that I do plan on talking about. And like I said, I'm excited because I think this topic is well overdue. And it's something that we really, really, really will be helpful to us and help prepare us. And it's something that will be helpful to the kingdom. You know, I don't believe any of my experiences or anything that I've learned or God has given me is just for me. But, you know, I have an assignment. I have a mandate to help build the kingdom. And so when you influence others and you help others to be healed, help others to be whole, it becomes it expands and it multiplies, and now we have a generation of people who are prepared to do God's work. So what are some things that I plan to talk about during our conversations? I want to talk about, how do we have the leader, the character to both hold the crown and the king and the cross? How do we develop? What are some of the character traits that we need to have as leaders to be able to handle both the crown and the cross? I want to talk about, how do we manage expectations? Because when it comes to leadership, people have expectations, and a lot of times there are expectations that they don't share. It's just, it's unspoken, and people have these expectations of you that sometimes you can fulfill and sometimes you can't fulfill. So how do we manage expectations as leaders? I want to talk about the importance of self-care. We've been taught for too long that selflessness is about selflessness is lacking self-care. We've been taught to be selfless, and selfless in the sense that we put others first, but we don't take care of ourselves. I want to talk about that because we have to be able to take care of ourselves. You can't allow yourself to be drained by the work that you're doing. You can't allow yourself to be pulled in places that you can't handle. Because guess what? When you get exhausted and you get tired and you get burned out, you allow yourself to be open to the attacks of the enemy. So self-care does not mean that you're selfish. Self-care helps you to be more selfless. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about how do we put systems in place to help us. How do we surround ourselves with people and systems that can help us to manage and handle both success and disappointment? Because a lot of leaders fail because there's not a support system to help them. And I talked a lot about that last week, about the importance of having a support system. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about building a long-term vision. I want to, as a Christian leader, a lot of us are preachers, and we think on a Sunday to Sunday basis, or if you're one who does lives like myself, you're thinking on a week to week basis on what I'm going to talk, the next thing I'm going to talk about. But really effective leaders have a long-term plan that each thing that they're doing leads to the eventual goal that they're trying to accomplish. I want to talk about the different types of leaders, because there are different types of leaders in ministry. There's different types of leaders in the world of Christian influencing. And we hold, truth be told, we hold Christian leaders to a different standard than other leaders. Right? We expect our pastors to be a certain way, but we don't expect our bosses to be a certain way. We don't hold our boss to the same standards that we hold our pastors. Right? We don't hold our managers to the same standard that we hold our leaders to, our Christian leaders to. So we're going to talk about the different types of leaders and the different types of, like I said, expectations that come along with it. I want to talk about the leaders that struggle with imposter syndrome, where you feel like you're an imposter, where you feel like a fraud, and you feel like you're not qualified to do the work that you're doing. Because there are pros and cons that come with that. I want to talk about the insecure leader. There are a lot of leaders who are battling with insecurity. How do you overcome those insecure issues while still leading? I want to talk about the idea of leading while bleeding. Because there are certain things that need to be corrected about and addressed about that. Because leading while bleeding, there has to be a boundary, right? If you're a leader who has a broken arm, right, in the spirit, where you're in a place where you're so broken that you can't lead, should you be leading? Should you lead while you're bleeding, or should you take the time to get healed? Allow God to heal you so that you can be able to properly lead. So there's so much with that, because there's so many leaders who are leading while bleeding, but bleeding on the people that they're leading. And when you get to that point where you're bleeding on the people that you're leading, then it's a no-no. Then you gotta stop. And there's so many leaders who are bleeding on the people that they're leading, and it's having an adverse effect on their leadership. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the aggressive leader. I want to talk about the passive leader. I want to talk about the prideful leader. I want to talk about the attention-seeking leader. Because we have all of these things, not just in Christian leadership, but in all industries. But I want to gear it towards Christian leadership. So all of these things I want to talk about, because I want us to be able to identify where we are, identify what we need to work on, and then make active steps to working towards those. Because ultimately, we have to be whole. It is God's desire that we be whole leaders. And too many of us don't have the platform, we don't have the space, we don't have the opportunity to really be open and to be transparent about our struggles. And so I want to address these different things, because when you're able to identify where you stand and where you are, then you know what you need to work towards, and you know where you need healing in. So, like I said, the imposter leader, the insecure leader, the prideful leader, the attention-seeking leader, the passive leader, the aggressive leader. I want to talk about the tyrant leader. The leader who demands respect, who demands that you acknowledge them, who demands that you almost worship the ground that they walk on. Right? We've all seen that. Those leaders who are immature, and because of their title, they feel that they deserve a certain level of respect. While yes, you do deserve a certain level of respect, you have to also give a certain level of respect. That's the thing that they miss. They see that they want you to respect their title. They want you to respect their bishopric, their apostleship, their prophetic, their pastoralship. They want you to respect their position and their title, but they don't give the respect that's required on that level. Because see, every title and every position, every level requires that you give a certain level of respect, instead of just receiving respect. And a real leader adds value to those that they lead. And if you are a leader who doesn't add value, you just have a title, people will not respect you, people will not follow you. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about, yes, I was just going to say that, prophetess. I was going to talk about compassion fatigue. That goes hand in hand with the leading while bleeding. There comes a point where you become fatigued as a leader, where you feel drained, where people are calling you nonstop, or people are calling you or emailing you or texting you, and they call you at the wrong time. And while yes, you have a responsibility, understand that your leadership role is not just who you are. And so, with the compassion fatigue, we have to understand that we got to set boundaries. We have to set boundaries. Right? Yes, I'm a pastor. Yes, I'm a prophet, but I'm also a husband. Yes, I'm also a father. Yes, I'm also an entrepreneur. And so, there has to be boundaries that are set. Because if I'm spending time with my family, then you have to respect that I'm spending time with my family. I will be praying for you. I will call you when I have an opportunity or a chance. But my life is not going to be completely dedicated to just answering your calls. And too many people that will follow us have this expectation that when I call, you're supposed to answer. Doesn't work like that. Because guess what? When they go to their job, their hours are between 9 and 5. And if their boss calls them or emails them after 5, they're not answering because I'm off the clock. So we have to be able to understand that we got to set boundaries and set borders, because we have lives. We have families. We have other responsibilities. And so we're going to talk about that as well, because that's a huge thing. It's a huge thing. Jesus made sure that he set his time apart where he disappeared in the crowd and went to go pray. Jesus also made time to hang out with his friends. Right? Jesus hung out with Peter at his house, so that when his mother-in-law got sick, he was able to heal her. That's because Jesus was chilling at Peter's house. Jesus was at the wedding, right? Jesus had friendship. He was friends with Lazarus. He was friends with Mary and Martha. Jesus hung out and sat at the table and ate with everybody. So there are boundaries that have to be set. And to your question, Minister Shanice, how do you know which leader you are? We're gonna go through each one. I'm gonna go through each one and list out the different characteristics of each one. Because each of us, we have our own struggles and our own battles, and a huge source of our struggles come from rejections at different levels of our lives. So someone who is insecure may have been rejected by a parent or rejected by a loved one, right? Someone who's aggressive or someone who's a tyrant leader, someone who's attention seeking may have been lacking in attention when they were a child, or lacking in attention in critical moments of their lives. So they're different, for lack of different characteristics, different symptoms that come along with those types of leaders. So we're going to understand the positive qualities as well as the negative qualities. The cross and the crown. That's what we're dealing with. Understanding the hardship and the burden, but also understanding the good qualities of who we are as leaders. I want to talk about so much things. I'm so excited because this is something I'm so passionate about. I have to have it, and I will have it. There are two particular topics that I want to talk about. I want to talk about leadership hurts. There's a lot of hurt that comes with leadership, so I want to talk about that. And one topic that I'm going to be geeking out on is the topic of leadership sucks. I'll give you a moment to process that, because there are moments when leadership sucks, where there are moments where you say, I don't want to do this leadership thing. And so I want to talk about that. Leadership hurts and leadership sucks, because it's almost taboo to say that kind of thing, especially if you're a kingdom ambassador, especially if you're a leader in ministry. But the purpose of this is to create a platform, create an opportunity to really address the deep-seated issues that come with leadership. Because it's not all glory, it's not all good, it's not all great, but it's all purposeful, right? The cross had its purpose, the crown has its purpose. And so all of it, the Bible says that all things work together. See, it's the bad and the good working together to make us whole. It's balance. Now, we often talk about balance in terms of doing multiple things that come along with it, that come along with leadership, right? You want to have your time to have your freedom. You want to have your time to do your work, to do the work. You want to have time to learn and grow, and all those things are important. But do we know that real balance is positive and negative? For some reason, last week I had this strange realization that real balance is having negative and positive. But we don't think of it that way. I was an average student at chemistry. You know, I understood the basics of chemistry, but one thing that never left my mind is the understanding of an atom. Is that you have to have equal amounts of protons and electrons. In order for the atom to be properly balanced, you have to have the equal number of negative charge and the equal number of positive charge. And if you have a charge that's too positive, or some an atom that's too positive, or an atom that has too much negative, too much electrons, both of those are imbalanced and unstable. Oh man, it is so much in that. When you look at the atom, when you have too much protons and not enough electrons, it's unstable. And if you have too many electrons and not enough protons, it's unstable. And so we are always talking about we want balance, we want balance, we want balance. I want us to really think about that. Do you really want balance? Because life has a way of giving you balance. And it's not just, spending time to do this thing and another time to do this thing, but real balance is being able to manage both the positive and the negative and allowing them to balance itself out. So we want the crown, but you're going to be unstable. You're going to be imbalanced if you don't have the cross. And vice versa. So life is balanced. Real balance is having an equal number of victories, of successes as well as failures, and being able to learn from all of them, to be stable. What we really want is to be able to juggle. We want to have the talent. You ever seen a juggler? They're able to throw as many balls in the air and keep it all in the air at the same time without losing control. That's what we want. We really want to be able to juggle. We don't want balance. We want to have the ability to juggle, to be able to juggle family, business, ministry, prayer time, reading your word, reading other books. We want to be able to juggle all of these things. We don't want balance. And so we have to stop saying that we need balance in our life. Because balance is having both positive and negative experiences together. So what we want is to be able to properly juggle the challenges of life and what comes along with our purpose. Because at the end of the day, all of it is working together for our good. But if we're not able to identify and define what is what, we will experience more disappointment and discouragement. But when you have an expectation and you're prepared to understand what is what and put what is what in the proper categories, then you know how to handle it. I expect that along with being influential, that people are not going to like me. And so because I have that expectation, guess what? When people don't like me, it don't bother me. Right? So it's important to understand that when we properly define things and properly put things in the right categories, then we're really going to be prepared to handle the everything that comes our way. Now, granted, there are unknowns. There are things that come out of left field. There are curveballs that come. And I believe that God really prepares us before those curveballs come. It's just really about, again, identifying and being able to adapt and to be able to adjust. And that's another thing that I want to talk about, is being able to adapt and adjust as a leader. Because we have to be able to do that. Oh, I forgot. In terms of types of leaders, I want to talk about the this is not how we do things type of leader. We all know those who are the leaders who refuse to be innovative, the leaders who refuse to move out of tradition, the leaders who refuse to move out of how things are done or how things are done here. We want to talk about that because there are pros and cons to that as well. But we have to be able to identify those things for two reasons. To identify who we are and if we fall into those categories, and also how to deal with others who are in those categories. In my years of being in ministry and working with different leaders, I've seen certain leaders with certain characteristics be mishandled because it turns off someone else. It turned another leader off, and so they mishandle that, and allows things to be, the situations to be worse. And I was talking about this yesterday, that we can't forget as Christians and as people of God, that we have to have love and compassion. A key thing that's a part of our walk is that we have to have love and compassion for one another. And so, how do I deal with someone who are showing signs as an insecure leader? Do I turn my back on them, or do I try to help them? Right? Do I, if there's a leader who's leading my bleeding, how do I help them? Because too many of us, we've been taught to judge and to criticize and to turn our backs on the leaders who struggle. And as a result, we're afraid to show those signs or those symptoms or those characteristics because we ourselves don't want to be rejected. We have to have that love and that compassion for one another. This is what Christ required. This is what Christ taught us in his ministry, is to have love, to pray for those who despitefully use us. We want to chop off their heads. We want to chop off their heads, but we don't want to feed them. And T.D. Jakes, he preached a message that was so powerful. He said, do you have the maturity to be able to sit at the table with John, the beloved, and Judas, who will betray you? See, Jesus didn't treat Judas any differently than John. John was the one who laid in his bosom. John was the beloved. John was in his inner circle of the 12. And Judas was the one who was stealing the money, who was ultimately going to betray him to his death. And he still taught, he still loved, he still fed both of them. So as leaders, we have to have that maturity to be able to love and handle the Johns, as well as love and handle the Judases. So I'm excited. These are just a few of the topics that I want to discuss, and I want us to have a conversation about. Like I said, I want you to send me, DM me your questions, DM me your ideas. What are some things that you want to address? Some things that you want to talk about? I respect everybody. I respect everyone, and I will keep your questions confidential. If you don't want me to share, I won't share who asked what questions, but I want us to have the openness and the transparency to ask these questions that we can address. Now, I assure you, I don't know everything. I will confess that I don't know everything. I really don't. And a lot of times leaders try to project this idea that they know it all. I in no way, shape, or form know everything. But I do my research. I ask and I speak to other leaders. One of the things that I want to do with this particular series is I want to bring on other leaders into the conversation. So I want to bring guest speakers that are going to be able to talk and share their perspectives, share the things that they've experienced in ministry, in business, in their Christian leadership and influential role. So the questions that you pose won't be just my answers. Of course, I'll be praying for God to give me the wisdom and the insight, but I will also be reaching out to other leaders to get their insight and their ideas and to get a better understanding so that I can be able to properly address the questions that we have. And so, like I said, DM me your questions, because I really want us as leaders to be whole. I want us to properly represent the kingdom of God. For too long, the kingdom has had a bad rep, and we're in a time where people are trying to make ministry irrelevant. They're trying to make church irrelevant. We don't need this anymore. But now more than ever, we need this. We need leadership. We need proper leadership. We need godly leadership. We see all of these things in the news today. So much people are dying, being killed, and being mishandled and being mistreated. And it's time now where God is causing leaders to rise up to be the solutions to the problems that are arising. God has been equipping us and training us, and we have to really be able to truly step out and walk in that, in the call that God has called us to. So I want to leave that with you. I just wanted to give a little introduction of what we're going to be addressing: the cross and the crown, the weight of both, the benefits of both, the joy and pain of leadership, the process, the anointing and the agony. All of these things I want us to have a conversation about, because I feel that now is the time that it's vital and is necessary. So I appreciate each and every one of you coming on. I appreciate your support. I hope that this was somewhat helpful to you. I hope that we can really be able to address some of the challenges, the pitfalls, the benefits that come along with being a Christian leader, being a Christian influential person. And so I ask for your prayers. I ask for your support. Share this with someone that you know who's in ministry, someone who you know is a Christian entrepreneur, a Christian leader, someone who you know really needs to hear this, because it's something that we all need in order so that we can be able to grow. So I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation. I pray that this week will be a week of blessing, that God will bless you and make you a blessing. I pray that wherever industry, whatever area, whatever field that you're working in, that God will give you favor. One of the things that I appreciate about Jesus is that the Bible says that God gave him faith, that he had favor with God and with man. And so I pray that God will give you favor with him and with men and with people, that God will give you the right connections, the right networks, the right environment, so that you can be able to grow and truly walk in your purpose and your destiny. And so I appreciate you tuning in. I appreciate your support. I love you all, and I'm looking forward. I pray that God will continue to bless you. God bless you, and I'll see you next week. Take care.